Making headlines for this week of September 18th. Refugee blowback. A crisis exposed. NATO allies embrace Russia, and Syrian leader calls out Western terrorist tactics. Canada election. Finally, something to vote for and not against. And a Bernie Sanders counterpart in Canada, Elizabeth May. A pacifist voice roars. Japan's youth are defying tradition and culture to speak out for peace and democracy. And tools for a new economy. 2 websites that can help poorer people find contacts, projects, and locations for the changing times.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. A fairly active news week going on, perhaps as the energies of change continue to build, both consciously and unconsciously, within the minds of a collective humanity. We start by looking at the ongoing refugee situation, one that has been attributed to Syria, although there have been scattered reports that some of the alleged Syrian refugees may not have been Syrian at all, but possibly of other nationalities also. It is hard not to feel compassion when we perceive people as being in need. Our hearts call us to speak out. Unfortunately, with that come the risks that our hearts will be taken advantage of and even abused. As I have said before, if one questions the crisis, one risks being labeled as a racist, or at the very least as being heartless. Yet, if we blindly continue to cater to these manufactured crises without exposing the source, then even more people are going to get hurt by lies being perpetrated and perpetuated by the global cabal. More sources are making the claims this week that the U.S. and its allies have been responsible for what has been happening, as CVN has mentioned previously, when an event that has been ongoing for years suddenly flashes onto the global headlines again and is constantly being covered over and over, one has to ask why, and also ask what is the real reason for this new alleged crisis, and also what is being covered up by this manufactured crisis. A picture of one little boy is used to fire up emotions of a crisis proclaiming a man who is allegedly a bad leader. Yet, in speaking with Russian journalists, he called out European and Western hypocrisy and double standards.
The Syrian leader has been giving an interview to several Russian channels, including RT, on ways to bring peace to his war-torn nation. Lizzie Phelan was there and told us how the conversation went.
In an interview with Russian media, the Syrian President Assad said that he's ready for political dialogue for the sake of defeating terrorism. Now, I was there for RT, who was amongst the Russian media who sat down with the Syrian president in his home in Damascus. And it's very rare for President Assad to give interviews to foreign media. And this comes at a time that the international community is mulling a proposal by Russia to unite various forces to fight against ISIS. Assad stressed that the primary goal for Syria is to defeat terrorism, and for that he reiterated his position that he's ready to hold talks with the opposition.
I'd like to use our meeting today to address all parties in a call to unite in the struggle against terrorism. Only through dialogue and the political process can we reach political goals that the Syrians should set for themselves.
Now, the Western-backed opposition continue to remain reluctant to enter into dialogue with President Assad. However, the Syrian government has managed to cooperate with the US-backed Kurdish fighters, the YPG, as I saw when I recently went to Hasaka, and I found a shared front line between them and the Syrian army in the fight against ISIS. Now, President Assad was also asked about the crisis of refugees who are fleeing Syria in their hundreds of thousands, and he said the issue isn't about Europe taking in more or less or no Syrian refugees, that if Europe is really sincere about solving this crisis, then it must stop supporting what the Syrian government considers are terrorists in Syria.
The world may not likely find out what exactly has been going on until this global cabal has finally been removed from its position of power and control. What we know is that Western countries, particularly the US and Israel, have been responsible for destroying countries and their economies, for the purposes of looting resources. If leaders do not bow down to Western power interests, they are bribed first, entrapped second, demonized and discredited third, and finally, if the leader has still not surrendered, then a crisis requiring a military intervention is created to justify the removal or killing of that leader. Regardless of how bad certain Middle Eastern leaders were alleged to have been, more people have been killed, more cities destroyed, more resources stolen, more money wasted, and more of the planet destroyed through Western intervention than without the intervention. Eric Zuess, writing for the Real Independent News and Film website on September 16th, writes that the flood of U.S.-caused refugees from Syria into the EU, because of U.S. bombing of Assad's forces, has forced Obama to recognize that the Western alliance is splitting up over this issue, and so Obama must backpedal fast, while there still remains time and opportunity to prevent the breakup of NATO itself. The cause of Syria's incredible bloodshed is the bombing by the U.S. Obama didn't care about the millions displaced and the hundreds of thousands killed, and this is Zuess still writing. He was determined to defeat Russia, and his allies in this were Saudi Arabia and Qatari royal families and their Turkish fellow Sunnis. But he and they have lost, so Obama now needs to make a fundamental choice. Zuess continues, America's long-standing secret alliance with the top financial backers of Islamic Jihad is finally being put to the test. Will the U.S. now go with the Europeans and ally with and admit into NATO Russia, which has wanted and was promised NATO membership, or will the U.S. instead remain allied with the top financial backers of Islamic jihadists, the Saudi and other Arabic oil state royals? Europe is now siding with Russia's Putin on Syria. Will Obama too go with Putin, or will he instead stay with Saudi King Salman, who continues his own bombings in Yemen, which are also directed against Shiites? Furthermore, the U.S. was itself behind the sarin gas attack that Obama had been hoping to use as reason to send U.S. bombers into Iraq. Obama, according to Zuess, lied to say that Assad had been involved in it. A London Guardian article by Julian Borger and Bastien Inzoralde on September the 15th reveals how the U.S. and NATO ignored a Russian offer in 2012 to have Assad step aside and a new leader installed that was acceptable to both countries. The article shows how Western leaders were naively confident that they could remove Assad on their own within weeks and get control of Syria without having to negotiate with Russia. The West was obviously wrong. The article writes that former Finnish President and Nobel Peace Prize laureate Martti Ahtisaari said Western powers failed to seize on the proposal. Since it was made in 2012, tens of thousands of people have been killed and millions uprooted, causing the world's gravest refugee crisis since the Second World War. In an article on the globalresearch.ca website on August 14th, prominent academic and author Dr. Michel Chossudovsky warned that the so-called war on terrorism is a front to propagate America's global hegemony and create a new world order. Dr. Chossudovsky said terrorism is made in the U.S. and that terrorists are not the product of the Muslim world. According to him, the U.S. global war on terrorism was used to enact anti-terrorism laws that demonized Muslims in the Western world and created Islamophobia. Elaborating on his argument, Chossudovsky said that NATO was responsible for recruiting members of the Islamic State while Israel is funding global jihad elements inside Syria. Dr. Chossudovsky, who is also the founder of the Center for Research and Globalization, further emphasized that the global war on terrorism is a fabrication, a big lie, and a crime against humanity. The tide appears to be turning against the U.S. once again by countries considered to be allies. This week, reports are coming in from numerous countries about floods of people suddenly storming entry points or crossing points. Some European countries may be starting to catch on to what NATO and the global bankers are trying to do, and therefore are now trying to stop the crisis. Veterans Today reported on August 12th that Germany is surprisingly quitting the anti-Putin alliance created by the United States. Germany now officially welcomes Moscow's readiness to engage with Syria and launches an initiative to end the war with the Russians and the French. Thus, the stream of refugees is to be stopped. Germany put thousands of soldiers on standby. German Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen told Der Spiegel they welcome Russia's President Vladimir Putin's involvement in the fight against the extremist Islamic State. It is in the common interest to combat the IS, she said. This may not be particularly surprising, since German industry leaders are already upset with the Russian sanctions being forced by the US, as they are hurting German trade with Russia, which is much higher than trade with the US. Reuters reported on September 12th that Germany and other Western European powers need to work with Russia as well as the United States to solve the crisis in Syria, this according to German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier met with his Russian, French, and Ukrainian counterparts in Berlin on Saturday evening and said afterwards he saw growing support for creating an international contact group to solve the Syrian conflict. What it is coming down to is this, and this has been said on CVN previously: the West must stop its war of terror. The refugee crisis solution is very simple. Get Western terror mongers and banking profiteers out of Syria and out of the picture. Now that the media shock of the refugee crisis has done its job, or so the Western people think, the focus now is back to attempts to blame and demonize Russia and the US and Israel, as the US and Israel attempt to draw Russia and Putin into a conflict that will never happen. An article on thenewsdoctors.com on September the 11th by Eric Draitser looks at the media hype regarding Russia. He writes that in examining the new chapter of the ongoing war in Syria, two critical and interrelated points seem to rise above all others in importance. Why is the Western media hyping this narrative of Russian intervention? And why is direct Russian involvement, limited though it may be, seen as such a threat by the US? The article continues. An Israeli publication reported that Russian air power would be increasing in Syria with Russian jets in Syrian skies, as the headline read. While all the information came from unnamed quote-unquote Western diplomatic sources and was accompanied by little more than assertions of fact without any tangible evidence, the media outcry began almost immediately, with literally hundreds of news outlets reporting the same information. Within 24 hours, however, a Russian military source had denied the allegations. Draitser raises another valid point. The U.S. military and government, with its vast surveillance and intelligence apparatus, knows perfectly well if a true Russian military buildup in Syria is really happening. Instead, the State Department focuses on the media reports, indicating that rather than responding to intelligence, it is responding to a media story, one which is based entirely on information the U.S. itself supplied. So the dramatic reaction to the reports is essentially a reaction to a story they themselves planted, and this is Draitser still writing. Translation: Washington is hyping the story in order to further its political position and to weaken Russia's by framing the debate as one of quote-unquote Russian interventionism. One of Draitser's conclusions is this. In referring to the real agenda of the conflict, he concludes that the obvious conclusion is that Russia's aid to Syria has been critical in stymieing Washington's regime change agenda, thereby necessitating an active propaganda assault to demonize Moscow's moves, both in regard to supplying and aiding Damascus and its calls to form a coalition against the Islamic State and international terrorism. In effect, the media is working to caricature Russia as an aggressor in Syria in order to deflect attention from the fact that U.S. efforts in Syria have failed and that the U.S. has no intention of effectively fighting the terrorism it continues to promote. Russia and Putin know what's going on and why, and Draitser finishes with the following. Keen political observers shouldn't be fooled by this sort of sleight-of-hand propaganda, but don't tell the corporate media. They're busy working overtime, parroting U.S. NATO talking points, rather than asking questions and seeking answers. In other geopolitical news, over to Greece, and as we come into the final few days before the new election in this country, it is still somewhat unclear as to what may happen this time around. As has been reported previously, several members of Syriza have broken ranks from the party to form their own parties. But whether or not they were successful in reaching the people on continuing the failed agenda of the Syriza party remains to be seen. An article on the English-language Greek news website E. Katemirini on September 17th reported the leader of the New Democracy Party as urging voters to pick stability over experiments. According to this article, in his final pre-election speech in central Athens on September 17th, New Democracy leader Evangelos Meimarakis appealed to Greeks to back New Democracy and put an end to Syriza's dangerous experiment. Describing Syriza leader Alexis Tsipras as a peddler of promises, Meimarakis said that Greece needs someone who will govern, not try to escape. Meimarakis claims in the article that New Democracy has shown that it has the ability to govern compared to the 7-month governing incompetence of Syriza. The question, however, is not whether New Democracy can or cannot govern, but rather or not they will listen to the voices of a nation that does not appear to want a bailout deal, more austerity, or a sell-off of national assets. What is very confusing, however, is the article reports the following. Several European leftist leaders, including Pablo Iglesias of Spain's Podemos party and Gregor Gysi from Germany's Die Linke party, are expected to be at the rally to show their support for Tsipras. Given that Syriza has failed to deliver on its agenda, it is unclear why the leader of Spain's Podemos party, another anti-austerity party, would be present to support Tsipras in his re-election bid. In a Euronews article on September 16th, Meimarakis indicated that he wanted a big coalition. However, at the same time, he was quoted as following the cabal line, saying that if we are to win back Europe's confidence, we must go ahead with the privatizations, the reforms, and the structural changes that were agreed while we take advantage of the benefits of EU funding and the big investment opportunities. Unless the Greek people rally and surprise the world once again, it seems that Greece is heading back to the days of being slaves to the global cabal and losing not only their freedom, but also their national assets. Meanwhile, the Catalonia region in Spain is gearing up for regional elections on September 27th. An article on the Sputnik News website on September 17th is reporting that a coalition of pro-independence parties has pledged to set the process in motion for the autonomous region to separate from Spain by organizing an official independence referendum if they win a majority. According to Julia Strubel, the coordinator of the Catalan National Assembly, Brussels would force Spain to recognize Catalonia's independence, as the EU does not want a long, drawn-out political and economic conflict inside its borders. At this point, it is unclear exactly what the powers in Brussels are wanting, since so much appears to be changing. The article reports that many in Catalonia have long sought independence from Spain, accusing Madrid of constraining the region's economic and cultural autonomy and of unfairly distributing resources in the country. Over 80% of Catalans who participated in an unofficial November 2014 vote supported secession from Spain. Coming up in the first week of October, Portugal will also be holding an election, so there will be much to observe over the coming few weeks as to how the global mood is shifting and whether or not more of the cabal's global infrastructure can be dismantled as peacefully and democratically as possible. Moving a bit east to the small country of Moldova, and the people of this country appear to have had enough, and they are standing up and speaking out in the wake of a banking scandal that has hit this country. Euronews reported on September 6th that tens of thousands of Moldovans have gathered in the capital city of Chisinau to demand the resignation of the president and call for early elections. The rare show of defiance is over a $1 billion banking scandal, which has hurt the fragile economy. Protesters are demanding President Nicolae Timofti that he stand down and put an end to the rampant corruption and the power of oligarchic groups in the impoverished nation of 3.5 million people. The article continues, "The anger on the streets is palpable. Even the return of the stolen money will not satisfy citizens. The authorities should be changed. The acting authorities should be dismissed and snap elections should be organized," said one protester. While a woman on the march just wants a normal life, we want to live in Europe and bring up our children in a normal way. We want the bandits and thieves out, and we want to live in a civilized country. The money, around 1/8 of Moldova's gross domestic product, vanished from the banking system in the scam and is now sitting in foreign banks. The scandal has shaken the confidence of Western allies and international lenders. The EU claims that successive pro-Western governments have done little to stem corruption and financial mismanagement. Over and across the Atlantic pond, now we go to Canada, and two stories coming out of Canada this week as we continue election coverage there. The Canadian election this year has centered predominantly on one theme, the theme of what Canada does not want, and that is a leader like Stephen Harper. What is now underway in Canada, however, is another movement, a movement to actually give Canadians something to vote for, as opposed to only voting against. A CBC article reported on September 15th that author Naomi Klein announced the release of an environmental manifesto backed by celebrities, activists, artists, and religious leaders. The LEAP Manifesto, a call for a Canada based on caring for the earth and one another, calls on government to honor Indigenous rights and move toward a clean economy fueled by renewable energy. According to the manifesto, this can be achieved in around 3 decades by moving away from industries like mining and oil extraction and instead focusing on environmentally friendly technology. The Huffington Post spoke with Klein, and she had this to say about the LEAP Manifesto.
So the LEAP Manifesto is a people's agenda for where we want to take this country in light of the multiple crises that we face in Canada and around the world. The climate crisis, the inequality crisis, economic, racial, and gender exclusion. But it's not a laundry list of issues. It's actually a coherent vision that knits together all of these issues and says scientists are telling us we need to lower our emissions fast. Engineers are telling us that we can do it fast, that we could get to 100% renewable energy in the next 20 years on electricity. By mid-century, we could have a 100% clean economy. But for us, that's not good enough. We also, as we transition away from fossil fuels, we want to do it in a way that heals the wounds that date back to the founding of this country. We want to embed it in climate climate justice principles, which means that the people who are getting the worst deal in the current system would be first in line to benefit from this transition in terms of the jobs, in terms of owning their own renewable energy. We also want to recognize that green workers, green jobs are not just putting up solar panels, and wind turbines. It's also people who are caring for young people, for old people, who are teaching, who are making media and art. These are low carbon professions that are actually under siege through the mentality of austerity. So it's a coherent vision. And it reflects the fact that I think a lot of people in Canada during this election are voting against something. A lot of people don't feel like they had the option to vote for the Canada that they actually want. So, a lot of what's happening is negative. The LEAP Manifesto is positive. The LEAP Manifesto is the vision for the country we actually want. It's what we're saying yes to. And it's been really exciting. It's not saying voting doesn't matter. We think voting does matter. But we don't think it's enough either.
In the CBC article, it was also written that the manifesto calls for universal child care and a universal basic annual income, something that has been referred to on CVN in the past, as well as an end to trade deals, which are blamed for hurting local economies. The manifesto has been translated into 8 languages, including Cree and Inuktitut. Klein says the manifesto is addressed to Canadians and the current government, while not supporting any one political party, though she hopes a new government will use the manifesto as a guide. Rabble.ca, an alternative Canadian news website, wrote that the manifesto is signed by over 50 organizations, including Oxfam, Idle No More, QP Union, CLC Union, PSAC, the Council of Canadians, Greenpeace, 350.org, and over 100 individual signatories of scientists, economists, artists, and activists. The signatories are planning to use the document to spark discussions and hold town hall meetings through the fall and winter, with the possibility of a leap year campaign in 2016. The Rabble article quotes poet George Eliot Clarke as saying that we are at an apocalyptic moment for the planet. According to Clarke, we have driven this entire planet to the brink of massive catastrophes that are definitely going to ruin everybody's bank accounts. So there's definitely an economic imperative for moving us away from extreme destructive environmental exploitation in the name of supposed development. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, according to the article, states that the plan can be paid for effectively. The CCPA alternative federal budget points to items such as an end to subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, a new financial transaction tax, higher royalties for natural resource extraction, and increasing corporate taxes and getting rid of other tax exemptions, and as well as cutting the military to pre-9/11 levels, eliminating income splitting and tax cuts for families with children, as well as a $30 per ton carbon tax. This is a document that both U.S. presidential candidate Bernie Sanders and Canadian Green Party leader Elizabeth May could get solidly behind. And speaking of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth May, what do they have in common, perhaps other than support for a LEAP manifesto? For starters, they are both more or less alone with their respective parliamentary bodies. They both have long and distinctive records in standing up for various issues. They both are highly intelligent and articulate in their speeches. Both are considered to be underdogs. Both have the strong will to take on the status quo and those responsible for it. Both are making waves using the grassroots and the internet to promote their campaigns. Both have been relatively ignored by the mainstream media until fairly recently. Both are facing calls to not be included in various debates. Bernie Sanders, however, has the support of an awakened, aware, and angry public who are speaking out and giving donations to support his campaign. Elizabeth May does not have this yet. In the Canadian election news this week, the attention seems to be turning to Elizabeth May, however, and it seems that some of the mainstream media are starting to take note. On September 17th, one of Canada's national newspapers, the Globe and Mail, sponsored a leadership debate on economic issues held in Calgary, Alberta, the home province of Prime Minister Stephen Harper. The three main party leaders were there, but despite having 76% support of the population to be in the debate, Elizabeth May was not invited. You can be sure that Harper had a hand in making that happen. This did not stop Elizabeth May from participating, however. With the help of Twitter Canada, May set up a small broadcast platform in a church in Victoria, British Columbia, and proceeded to tweet her way through the leadership debate, keeping up with other leaders and their comments, their facts, and their promises. A CTV News article wrote that May was not in attendance at the Globe and Mail's leadership debate in Calgary on Thursday, but on Twitter, she may have come out on top. In total, May's video posts received 14,000 retweets and favorites, and she gained 3,900 new followers. The article added that before the debate, May didn't shy away from taking jabs at the Globe and Mail event, which she called a bogus corporate private debate. The Toronto Star wrote the following: The Globe and Mail chose not to invite May to Thursday night's debate, which was filmed at Calgary's Stampede Park, arguing that limiting the format to just the leaders of the country's biggest parties would be more focused. In response to that, May tweeted, "As I attempt to make sense of those three men arguing over each other incomprehensibly, I wonder if it's occurred to the Globe and Mail that this wasn't exactly the focused debate they wanted." Scott Hoff, writing for the Inquisitor.com website, asked the rhetorical question, who won the debate? And the answer was that according to the internet, it was Elizabeth May. It could be argued that it was a mistake to leave May out of the debate. Because the leaders were so busy interrupting each other, very little was really said. Had May been present, she likely would not have been able to elaborate on her points as effectively. In hindsight, she may actually have had the winning seat at the debate. Hoff writes that by choosing to use Twitter instead of having the Green Party not represented, May found a receptive audience. An unexpected consequence was that she was able to clearly and eloquently convey her message in a manner that may be easily researched in the coming days. Footage from Stampede Place showed an entirely different scene, full of posturing, jockeying, and bickering. Harper has gone to great lengths to avoid facing Elizabeth May in a debate. He has good reason to be afraid. She would completely dominate the discussion. An opinion commentary by Warren Bell in the National Observer on September 14th noted 4 reasons why Harper will not debate Elizabeth May. Bell writes, "Harper's afraid. He knows that if he were to engage in a fair debate against Green Party leader Elizabeth May in public with millions of Canadians watching, he would lose." He offers the following reasons. Number 1, May understands climate change. Harper doesn't want to. First of all, she knows climate change cold and knows how critically important it is. May's been aware of the problem since scientists started talking about it 30 years ago, just like Peter Kent, Stephen Harper's long-ago Minister of Environment, who actually produced a document on the subject in 1984 for the Prime Minister's nemesis, the CBC. The difference between Elizabeth May and Peter Kent is that she never gave up her principles and never tried to pretend later on that she didn't know anything about it. The difference between May and Harper is that she doesn't have ideological and possibly religious reasons to deny its existence. Number 2, May is a far more skilled presenter than Harper. The second reason Stephen Harper is avoiding May is that she's a more fluid and relaxed debater. She is a more accessible, convincing, and comfortable presenter of ideas in public. In particular, she spontaneously and openly celebrates who and what she loves and appreciates, and she can muster an astonishing array of facts and details about subjects that the Prime Minister wishes to ignore and suppress, such as how government works, and how the economy and the environment are linked together. May can confidently laugh out loud, make self-effacing jokes, or stray from a presentation into an illuminating anecdote, but Stephen Harper rarely does. It so rarely happens now that when Harper appears to go off script or speak with emotion, it's national news. Face to face, this difference is obvious, and Stephen Harper undoubtedly knows the contrast would make him look stodgy and cold. He's cultivated this persona for so long it's become his trademark. If Canadians want change, it's clear that one change would be towards warmth and compassion, inclusiveness and cooperation, qualities that have been mostly absent from Stephen Harper, the politician, but which are prominently displayed in Elizabeth May. Number 3, she knows Harper is trying to subvert Canada's democratic institutions. The third reason Harper doesn't want to debate is that May has got his number. Just as he's been avoiding or ignoring her in public and in private, and excluding her from any and all public venues he possibly can, she's been watching him, reading in detail what he reveals in legislation and in parliamentary debate and public pronouncements. She knows he is trying to hollow out Canadian democracy. Among current political leaders, May is the best equipped to take down Stephen Harper's record, piece by piece. The omnibus bills, which she has read and critiqued, the deception in the so-called Fair Elections Act, and the horrendous invasion of Canada's civil liberties in Bill C-51, which she has also read and critiqued in detail. If Harper and May were to debate one-on-one in public, the Prime Minister's incremental destruction of Canada's democracy would be laid bare for all to see. Number 4, May is every bit as smart as Harper, if not more so. She's a lawyer who was born into a family of social and environmental advocates, whose childhood was filled with a combination of remarkably diverse learning experiences and much actual real-world advocacy beginning in her teens. May's deeply informed, steel-trapped mind has a tighter grip than Harper's on what the majority of Canadians, especially young Canadians, really want in their lives. Seasoned and robust and diverse public debate and action oriented towards our common future. She has a depth of tangible integrity that outstrips Canada's Prime Minister by a country mile. Elizabeth May is a seasoned, deeply intelligent, ethically driven extrovert with a lifelong history of confronting large and powerful political dragons with a solid documentation and slaying them dead. Sadly, she is exactly the kind of leader that Canada needs right now on the global stage, but people are seemingly reluctant to give her that chance. If only Bernie Sanders could spare a moment to come up to Canada and stand with Elizabeth May, it could bring some great media exposure. In fact, I think I'm going to send an email to Mr. Sanders' campaign office and ask if he would come up to appear with her. Canada-US relations could be fantastic with these two leaders working together. In financial news, the eyes of numerous bankers and investors worldwide were focused on the U.S. this week as rumors circulated that the U.S. Fed Reserve may raise its rate. For now, however, it seems that they will not be taking action. Euronews has more on this story.
The Federal Reserve is to keep interest rates unchanged. It's a sign of prudence by the U.S. Central Bank and Fed Chair Janet Yellen amid concerns about a weak world economy, not least China's economic slowdown. The main federal funds rate, the bank's overnight borrowing rate, has been virtually zero since the immediate aftermath of the financial meltdown in 2008. Speculation was rife about a possible rise, but in what amounted to a tactical retreat, the Fed said an array of global risks and other factors had convinced it to delay what would have been the first rate hike in nearly a decade.
An article by Steve Goldstein on the MarketWatch.com website on September 17th reported a statement made by the Fed that recent global economic and financial developments may restrain economic activity somewhat and are likely to put further downward pressure on inflation in the near term. The article added that by a 9-1 vote, the Fed kept rates steady as it said that the financial market turmoil did not change its assessment that the risks to the economy were nearly balanced, but added a new phrase that it was monitoring developments abroad. What might be interesting is to find out who voted for the rate hike and why. As I have mentioned many times, I am not a financial expert, nor do I pretend to even fully understand the nature and the tricks of the fractional reserve model of banking. There are no doubt some questions going through the minds of those on the board of the U.S. Federal Reserve. Among the questions might be why the quantitative easing program is no longer working, although it might be easy for an outsider to speculate that the U.S. dollar has been devalued enough and the debt is now too high, and therefore mathematically no one can no longer adequately predict what will happen, but many seem to be seeing the light of the train coming straight towards them, and there is no way to avoid it. Financial pundits in North America are trying to tell people that the U.S. dollar is strong and that it is the Chinese economy that is weak. It would seem, however, that the facts suggest otherwise. If my knowledge of the situation is correct, then it seems that the transition of China to its own system of banking, outside of the cabal-controlled institutions of the IMF, World Bank, and Bank of International Settlements, these might be interpreted by those in the West as a weakening Chinese economy. As China devalues, it is able to offload more U.S. Treasury debt, and this in turn seems to force the U.S. dollar up, creating the illusion that the U.S. dollar is strong. As we heard last week, however, the dollar can only go up so far as it hyperinflates before the bubble will pop and the dollar may suddenly disappear. I may not be able to clearly explain this, but the fact that the Fed did not raise its rate might suggest that it is desperately trying to prevent the inevitable. They know they are going to get hit by a train, but the questions are, which train and when? Raising the rate could provide China with more opportunity to defend the yuan by selling more U.S. debt and hurting the U.S., as North American people might say. Or as others might say, the opportunity is for China to offload more toxic and worthless debt to further support its transition to its own banking system. China does not appear to want to harm or destroy the U.S. economically. It would not be in their interests to do so. However, they do seem acutely aware of those in the U.S. who have destroyed our planet with a fraudulent system of banking, and China may be trying to remove these people as gently as possible. While on the subject of removing corrupted and criminal bankers, it is completely understandable that those who now understand what has been going on in the financial industry over so many decades, that they are feeling varying degrees of frustration at the lack of accountability that has been taking place. Without making any promises, there may just be a beacon of hope that bankers may soon get their day of reckoning. With more on this story, here is a report from Ring of Fire Radio.
Has the Department of Justice finally figured out how to prosecute Wall Street bankers? They think they might have done just that. The Justice Department admitted late last week that they've been approaching Wall Street crime the wrong way. Now that comes as a shock to approximately 0 people in the United States, as anyone who's read the news in the last 7 years knows that the DOJ is completely useless when it comes to prosecuting white-collar banking criminals. But the DOJ says that they now know how to go after banking criminals. Rather than taking on companies as a whole, they're now going to focus on individuals who commit crimes. Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates released a memo late last week saying that the department is now going to hone in on individuals, which they hope will deter banking crimes in the future. Yates further explained that since it's obviously impossible to physically put a company in prison, focusing on the actions of individuals will help bring more accountability to the industry. The plan going forward will be to have companies turn over the names of those involved so that prosecutions can take place should there be sufficient evidence. Now, I want to be optimistic about this new plan by the DOJ, but it's difficult considering how many times we've been promised action and we're left with more of the same. Just a few months ago, former AG Eric Holder promised that prosecutions were coming within 90 days, but instead of prosecutions, he left office to rejoin his former white-collar criminal defense law firm. But Holder's gone now, so maybe this is a new era for the Justice Department. Another factor that we have to consider is that the DOJ is hoping to make up for lost time before the 2016 election. President Obama was swept into office on a wave of anti-banker resentment, and he understands that the public is wholly disappointed with his lack of action, a disappointment that could cost the Democratic Party some votes in 2016. So this could be Obama's way of shoring up his legacy before he leaves office, as well as a way to uphold the promises that he made to voters all those years ago. Let's hope that we will see some prosecutions out of this.
With the power that corporations have acquired over the years, it is true that it is much harder to take down a company than it would be to go after all the little pawns who are innocently doing their jobs, perhaps even naively believing that they are not breaking any laws. By declaring the intention to go after them, the pressure may build on individuals who will now begin to check whether they are breaking laws. And if they discover they are breaking laws, and they are being forced to continue breaking those laws to keep their jobs, the employees may take the initiative to go to the Department of Justice to seek protection, perhaps in exchange for information and testimony. Some valid points are made, and no doubt many are hoping that Obama will fulfill the legacy that so many were hoping for when he was first elected. Over to general news. Ahead of the UN General Assembly meeting next week in New York, the country of Iceland, or perhaps more specifically the city of Reykjavik, is now on the record as boycotting products from Israel. According to an article on the Iceland Magazine website, the city of Reykjavik will no longer purchase goods made in Israel. The city council voted yesterday that the city would not purchase any goods manufactured in Israel as long as the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories continues. The article adds that the explanatory memorandum argues the boycott is a symbolic act. It shows that the city of Reykjavik supports the right of Palestinians to independence, while condemning the Israeli policy of apartheid in the occupied Palestinian territories. Sole Thomasdottir of the Left Green Alliance, who forms part of the governing coalition in Reykjavik City Hall, along with the Social Democrats, the Bright Future, and the Pirate Party, told the Icelandic National Broadcasting Service that the boycott created pressure on authorities in Israel to end the occupation of the Palestinian territories. She also argued the city might boycott products manufactured in other states which engage in human rights violations. The decision is not without its controversy, however, as one lawyer has spoken out, saying that the city has no right to set any foreign policy, and the act is allegedly in violation of the Icelandic constitution. Israel's response was swift and harsh. An article from Agence France-Presse via Yahoo News on September 17th reported that Israel has lashed out at the boycott of its products by the Icelandic capital city's council over the occupation of the territory, describing it as a quote-unquote volcano of hatred. According to Israeli Foreign Ministry spokesman Emmanuel Nashon, without any reason and justification besides pure hatred, calls are being issued to boycott the State of Israel. The noose is tightening around the Zionist leadership of Benjamin Netanyahu. The article closes by noting that Israel is also up in arms against a push by the European Union nations to label products from its settlements, a move it considers tantamount to a boycott. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently evoked the Nazi era to criticize an EU parliamentary motion on labeling. Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank are seen as illegal under international law, as well as a threat to the Middle East peace process by eroding the basis for a future Palestinian state. Next week, the UN General Assembly will begin, and there is some speculation that France may propose a resolution to recognize Palestine, a move that could surely push people like Netanyahu over the edge in anger. In Japan, an argument could be made that perhaps meaningful change is beginning to unfold in this pacifist country. Longtime followers of Benjamin Fulford may know that he has been calling Shinzo Abe, the Prime Minister of Japan, a puppet of the global cabal, and the cabal is forcing him to keep Japan in alignment with the cabal plans. Fulford has suggested on occasions, however, that this support is falling, and the following two stories may also support this. I start first with a story appearing on the Geopolitics website on September 14th. The article reported on the eruption of Japan's largest volcano on September the 9th. What makes the eruption remarkably suspicious, however, is that the eruption occurred shortly after Japan's announcement to engage in ruble-yen swaps, bypassing the US dollar. According to the article, after Japan's announcement of a plan to engage in ruble-yen swaps on September the 9th, effectively bypassing US sanctions against Russia, its largest volcano erupted in what could be interpreted as a way of warning Japan not to sever ties with the Kabbalists and engage with Russia yet. The article had also noted that there had been no indication of an eruption that was coming, according to meteorologists. As has been seen in recent weeks, suspicious explosions and now a volcanic eruption appear to be suspiciously in alignment with choices being made by countries like China, Thailand, and Japan to bypass the US dollar or to make moves to devalue their own currencies. Change, however, is also coming on another level within Japan. A change that seems to be finally breaking out within the consciousness of the Japanese people, or at least more specifically, in its younger generations. This is perhaps somewhat uncharacteristic for a nation of people that have been taught to respect elders or institutions and to generally be more pacifist. A London Guardian article on September 16th by Justin McCurry reports on students protesting against proposed legislation that will alter the pacifist constitution of Japan to allow Japan to send troops overseas for the first time since World War II. According to the article, it was clear that the voice cutting through the night air in Japan's political nerve center did not belong to a veteran of the country's anti-war movement. Right on cue, the crowd repeated each high-pitched yell of Abe wa yamero, meaning Abe quit. First at normal pace and then with a rhythm borrowed from hip-hop and inspired by pure, unadulterated rage. Then in English, a simple statement that has come to define a Japanese summer of public discontent, the likes of which it has not seen in a generation. This is what democracy looks like. The article notes the government is planning to pass a series of security bills that reinterpret parts of the war-renouncing constitution of the country. Abe claims, according to the article, that the changes will enable Japan to respond more effectively to security threats from a more assertive China, a nuclear-armed North Korea, and Islamist terrorism. Opinion polls show a majority of voters oppose the move. Perhaps the people of Japan are finally speaking up against the global cabal and its further attempts to erode the values of Japan and its culture. The article adds that the suspicion that he is abusing his coalition's comfortable majority to railroad the bills through Parliament has brought teens and people in their 20s onto the streets in unprecedented numbers. The most prominent group, Students' Emergency Action for Liberal Democracy, or SEALDS for short, has its roots in public opposition to the 2013 State Secrets Law, under which whistleblowers and journalists face imprisonment for revealing and reporting sensitive information. With every gathering outside Parliament, SEALDS members are challenging the notion that protesters in Japan must be above a certain age, an eccentric, or a Marxist ideologue. They are not embarrassed about their interest in fashion and music, and they are comfortable about replacing their predecessors' radicalism with a simple faith in freedom and democracy. The article features interviews with 5 young Japanese people between 16 and 24 who are not afraid to speak out. 24-year-old Beniko Hashimoto said, "Some politicians have called us selfish. Well, if it's selfish to oppose war, then yes, I suppose I am selfish." Young Japanese aren't as politically aware as people in other countries, but that's because we've been educated to think that way. There's a tendency in Japan to believe that because someone in power says everything is going to be okay, then it will. 19-year-old Irina Nakagawa said, "The point of politics is to promote the common good, so we're the complete opposite of selfish in what we're doing. We're defending our rights. It's as simple as that." 20-year-old Moeko Mizoi says, "When I think back to when I was at school, I had no friends with whom I could talk about politics. But later I spoke up and found that, actually, lots of people are worried about what's happening with the security bills." 16-year-old Takuya said, "It's not just about one issue. There are lots of other things that worry me about the Abe government. I'm not old enough to vote, so joining these protests is the only way I can make my feelings known." For a country that has traditionally been pacifist, young Canadians and young people in other Western countries, and particularly Sweden, should take note of the revolution brewing in this country. And this is what the new revolution looks like, folks. So many people are now beginning to look around, and they seem almost surprised at the changes they are seeing in the world and how quickly things are being exposed and how new things are coming out. At this time, there are empowered souls who are standing up and creating something that is helping to push the changes in the world. At the same time, however, there are others who still need a bit of help in finding themselves, or at least where they need to be. This week, I would like to offer 2 websites to listeners out there who may be struggling and looking for a place to contribute, but may not have a lot of money to do so. They may not know where to start, or perhaps even how to get there. In other cases, people are wanting or feeling a need to be somewhere, but they do not have the resources to travel there. This week, I hope I can help you with this. There are 2 websites I have been introduced to. One of them is called BlaBlaCar, and the other is called helpx.net. It turns out that Euronews conveniently posted an article on September 17th about BlaBlaCar, and in this report, Euronews shares the following.
The car-sharing group BlaBlaCar says it's had $200 million, that's 177 million euros, in new investment, said to be a record for a young French startup. The Paris-based company has taken funding from venture capital firms in the US and Sweden. It reportedly becomes part of a privileged group of private tech startups valued at more than $1 billion. BlaBlaCar pairs up motorists with passengers wanting to travel and is in the forefront of the sharing economy. It's been growing 100% each year in Europe, with 10% of the population in France said to have signed up.
BlaBlaCar reportedly has 20 million members and operates in 19 countries. Unfortunately, the service is not yet listed as available in the US or Canada, but some of the choices include Germany, Spain, France, Croatia, India, Italy, Mexico, the Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Serbia, Turkey, the UK, Russia, and Ukraine. At one of the websites, you can put in your travel dates and destinations, and the website will search for people who are traveling and willing to take other people along. It's a form of cost sharing and can lead to new contacts, new friends, new adventures, maybe even a lot more. For those traveling through Europe, however, this could be the cheap and fun way to go. There is also a listing of numerous job postings for BlaBlaCar in many of these countries, so CVN listeners in any of these countries may be interested in applying if they have the skills and legal ability to work in the desired country. The link to the job postings will be included in the show summary for this story. The other website, HelpX, is a site where people who are looking for help for almost anything and are willing to have people stay at their homes for any length of time. In looking through this website, I have seen people trying to start eco-communities and are inviting people to bring their skills, abilities, and love to their projects for weeks, months, or perhaps even longer. In most cases, accommodation and at least some food is provided. There are families who need help with sitters for children or to teach English or another language. And there are people who cannot afford renovations to their home or apartment, and they take in someone for a month, and the individual works on the renovations in exchange for the opportunity to live in another country and make friends all over the world. If you happen to be one who is struggling where you are right now and are willing to get out and help others while looking for new energies and new people to help change the world, these two websites may just be the answers to your prayers. If you are one who needs help on a property or with a big project but cannot afford to do it, perhaps this site will help you find people with skills to help if one is willing to offer accommodations, food, and whatever else in exchange. We are co-creating together, and while this global cabal still has some of its controls over us, it is up to us to create the ways that we can find to help and to get the help we need or give the assistance that we are longing to give. We are in this together, and we are changing this world together. Links to both websites will be in the show summary for this story. This is what the new economy looks like, folks. Over to disclosure news now, and in disclosure-related news for the week, it has been pretty easy up to now to discredit almost any source, regardless of how many credentials or how much experience one may have when that source begins to disclose the existence of civilizations and technologies beyond Earth. From highly credentialed people from numerous credible backgrounds to videos and pictures appearing on the internet, as well as the hidden messages appearing in science fiction programs, it is getting harder and harder to deny the reality of what is. We are not alone in the universe, and it also seems that we are not alone on Earth. Arjun Valia, in a September 16th article on the Collective Evolution website, writes about Dr. John Brandenburg, a plasma physicist. According to the article, he did his graduate work in California at Lawrence Livermore National Lab in controlled plasmas for fusion power and has worked in energy, defense, and space research for a number of years. He is currently a consultant at Morningstar Applied Physics, LLC, and a part-time instructor of astronomy, physics, and mathematics at Madison College. He is the principal inventor of the MET, the microwave electrothermal plasma thruster, using water propellant for space propulsion. This does not sound like someone who would otherwise be described as a tinfoil hat-wearing quack. The article writes that Brandenburg was involved in the Clementine mission to the moon, which was part of a joint space project between the Ballistic Missile Defense Organization and NASA. The mission discovered water at the moon's poles in 1994. He was the deputy manager of that mission. His purpose was to map every corner of the moon and submit that data for interpretation. The article continues, "It was during the Clementine mission more specifically the mapping of the lunar surface, that he began to suspect an extraterrestrial presence on the moon. Of all the pictures I've seen from the moon that show possible structures, the most impressive is a picture of a miles-wide rectilinear structure. This looked unmistakably artificial, and it shouldn't be there. As somebody in the space defense community, I look on any such structure on the moon with great concern, because it isn't ours. There's no way we could have built such a thing. It means someone else is up there. A few other academics are quoted in the article. For example, Theodore Loder III, Professor Emeritus of Earth Sciences at the University of New Hampshire, is quoted as saying that intelligent beings from other star systems have been and are visiting our planet Earth. They are variously referred to as visitors, others, star people, ETs, and so on. They are visiting Earth now. This is not a matter of conjecture or wishful thinking. Dr. Jack Kasher, Professor Emeritus of Physics at the University of Nebraska, has said that there is another way, whether it's wormholes or warping space. There's got to be a way to generate energy so that you can pull it out of the vacuum. And the fact that they're here shows us that they found a way. Also, the late Dr. Brian O'Leary, former NASA astronaut and Princeton physics professor, was quoted as saying that there is abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that civilizations have been visiting us for a very long time, that their appearance is bizarre from any kind of traditional materialistic Western point of view, that these visitors use the technologies of consciousness. They use toroids. They use co-rotating magnetic disks for their propulsion systems. That seems to be a common denominator of the UFO phenomenon. Of course, you have to decide for yourself. If you are one who needs more science-based information, there is an abundance of academics and science professionals now speaking out on the subject, assuming you are ready to hear what they have to say. Other sources are perhaps a bit harder for people to accept, such as one source, Corey Goode, who has been speaking out over the last 6 to 8 months, especially regarding the secret space programs that are existing and are funded via black projects, most of which get money that has been funneled out of the global financial system by the global banking cabal. In an article by Dr. Michael Salla appearing on the Exopolitics website on September 16th, Salla looks at the truth behind a TV program called Stargate SG-1 and whether technologies such as this really exist. Salla asks, could the highly popular television series Stargate SG-1, which aired between 1997 and 2007, could it be more science than fiction? Secret space program whistleblower Corey Goode claims it is based on real-life advanced travel technologies found all over the planet, solar system, and galaxy. Goode goes on to add that apparently technologies depicted in the SG-1 TV series as being fairly accurate of how ring-shaped ancient portals or stargates actually look and work. He said that the navigation system is similar to how the internet operates, whereby numerical sequences are assigned for individual computers, networks, ISPs, and countries. Goode also says that a series of numerical coordinates based on hyperdimensional mathematics designate different galaxies, solar systems, planets, and so on, which becomes the address for a particular portal. This has similarities with the coordinate navigation systems depicted in the original Stargate movie of 1994 that was then incorporated into the Stargate SG-1 television series. The article notes an interesting fact about the TV series. Salla writes that one episode even featured the U.S. Air Force's then-serving Chief of Staff, General Michael Ryan, who appeared in the Cheyenne Mountain complex, which housed the ancient Stargate technology. It is very unusual for a sitting member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to do a cameo for television let alone a science fiction show depicting his military service hiding advanced technologies from the public for national security reasons. This Stargate episode clearly implied that very senior officials in the U.S. Air Force were in favor of soft disclosure through the entertainment industry. So there are competent, qualified, and credible people working on numerous levels to try to bring truth into the public sphere. As always, they can only do so much, and it relies on the public to do its part in demanding more from leaders and representatives. We can shut them down and make them listen through our choices to shop and our choices to vote. Most importantly is that we choose not to exist in fear. While on the subject of whistleblowers with supposed credibility, an article has appeared on the website UFOs, The Truth Is Out There, sharing a story by an alleged retired U.S. Navy Petty Officer First Class Flight Engineer. The source is identified as Brian, and it is believed to not be his real name. According to this article, the letter received recounts Brian's bizarre and extraordinary experiences flying cargo and rescue in Antarctica between the years of 1983 to 1997. He claims that a collaboration between humans and aliens exists, and that Antarctica is a major research ground for these incredible collaborations. Brian's experiences included several observations of aerial silver discs darting around over the trans-Antarctic mountains. He and his crew also saw a big hole in the ice, only about 5 to 10 miles from the geographic South Pole, that was supposed to be a no-fly zone. But during an emergency medical evacuation situation, they entered the no-fly zone and saw what they were not supposed to see: an alleged entrance to a human and ET science research base created under the ice. Then at a camp near Marie Byrd Land, some dozen scientists disappeared for 2 weeks, and when they reappeared, Brian's flight crew got the assignment to pick them up. Brian says they would not talk, and their faces looked scared. The letter, written to introduce him to people working with the Earth Files website, is included on the website, detailing his credentials and experiences for those choosing to read more. Also on the website is a 30-minute documentary highlighting some of the activities alleged to have occurred on Antarctica. Looking now to tech news. When you have been out shopping, how many times have you perhaps asked yourself what the real contents are of the foods or products you are buying? Have you perhaps wished that there was some technology that could break down and show you the composition of a product before you choose to buy it? The answer may now be here, and it is an answer that comes from Israel. An article appearing on the Natural Healing magazine website on September 14th reports that this new device represents a revolution on the market and can instantly tell you what is in your pill or what it will do for you. Is the dress you like real cotton? And are those bananas genetically modified? This scanner has a molecular sensor that scans the product you like and gives you a complete list of its characteristics. The article explains how the device works. Thanks to the near-infrared spectroscopy technology, this scanner doesn't need to touch your product. The only thing that you need to do is to point this scanner to the product you like. Then, each molecule interacts with the light in order to create an optical signature, and then it gives the list of all the properties of the product. This scanner will help you while you do your regular shopping at the supermarket, when you buy clothes, or while you eat in your favorite restaurant. The scanner works thanks to the data gathered by users. The more users it has, the wider is the data. The website of the startup company states that this is a circle of information and that each user helps other users to decide on their products. Although there are other SCIO devices available that are bigger, Dror Sharon, co-founder of the startup company, says the device is about the size of the palm of one's hand and will link to a smartphone to share its information. The article adds that The gadget will be available from December of 2015 for a price of about $250 or €220. Sharon adds that the interest for this scanner is huge, starting with developers and teenagers through to ordinary people up to multinational companies. He also adds that his next aim is the industrial sector. He even believes that one day smartphones will come with SCIO technology built in. Now, what is SCIO, you may ask? According to the scio.co.za website in South Africa, SCIO is the Scientific Consciousness Interface Operations System and is a universal electrophysiological biofeedback system. It coordinates a complex electromodal biofeedback program with a computer software in order to gather bioenergetic information of a client's subconscious. However, in this case, the device is collecting similar information from food and other objects. Finally, in health news, with so many sources claiming one thing or another during this month of September, what it ultimately comes down to, however, is what you take ownership for and what you choose to create and manifest from that which exists within you. One source, Story Waters, has been speaking out on subjects related to the mastery of beliefs. His website, whenhuman.com, writes that whenhuman.com expresses the perspective on reality from the non-physical form we exist in prior to birth, the state of consciousness from which we choose to come and experience being human. Now, in selected excerpts from a YouTube recording, Waters highlights this responsibility facing each of us in our respective paths. From his video, The Time Is Now.
What unifies you is your readiness and your desire to now engage with this world and this life. It is to understand that everything that you are about to walk into is of your own creation. No exceptions. And that is empowerment. That is creatorship. That is knowingness. That is trust. That is freedom. There is a potential that has now arrived that will allow you to start creating this thing that you have already been working on for so long inside of your energetic bodies. And now, as you step forward, it is up to you. And when you understand your freedom and your creatorship in that way, so you come to understand that this next step, the birthing of whatever it is you have conceived inside of yourself, that is when the understanding of it is coming from you, that is what will allow its birth. And you have in your own personal energy fields created this to some degree. You have laid the blueprints, so the frustration that you have felt up to this point through this readiness you have had is accepting responsibility for it such that you can release it. The time, it is here. Allow yourself to savor it. You have created it for yourself. This life you have birthed, it is yours. There is no competition for it. So now in these coming months, we ask you to open yourselves to change, open yourselves to receiving. And for many, it will be about receiving. Receiving will be the initial barrier, because it may well feel alien or foreign to receive in this way. Many become so attached to this process of creating, of designing, that you wish to stay there instead of to walk into this architecture you have created. You prefer the drawing boards. That will change, but for some you may wish to stay with your drawing boards a bit longer, and that is appropriate as well. But when you are ready, there is a choice to be made, and what you will discover for each of you individually is what the nature of that choice is. We hear you saying yes, yes, I choose, yes, I'm ready. It is not that kind of choice. That is said, that is done. You are at the front of the queue. It is clear you are saying yes. What is before you, as well as this great freedom, this great dream you are about to walk into, is a death. And what will come up for you in these next months is the nature of that death. For many, the word death brings up this fear that it must be a bad thing, or for others that it may just be a good thing. It is not a good thing or a bad thing. It is just that a change is going to occur. To leave this reality you are in now, to re-enter the reality you have been creating in your heart. It is everything you have been asking for. To receive it, things will change. Things in your external life, people in your life, relationships in your life, relationships with your work, with your play, maybe where you're living. But more than anything, changes inside yourself, the very nature of your beingness. So many ways are to be let go of: struggle, difficulty, suffering. It is not that these things will never appear in your life again. They are flavors of this universe, this world. They will be around you. You will still have a relationship with them. Mainly for most of you, through other people in your life. Your relationship with so many of these things is to change, and that is you changing. You are going to become someone different than you are now. It is not just that your reality, your world, your very experience of your beingness is to change. It is opening up your magical selves, opening up intuition, knowing things beyond your mental knowing things you couldn't possibly know just because you know them, and coming to trust in that inner knowing. It is developing a way of life that flows from inside, and though it flows into the external world, though it interacts with the external world, it is not governed by it. It is to birth the reality of you inside this mass reality. You are each an individual reality. You are not just sharing one reality. You are each a complete reality unto yourself, and you are all together in this meeting place, and you are creating another mass reality from that. But what we are talking of here is opening more and more your personal individual reality that is different from the others around you, and allowing that difference, allowing yourself to be different. If you wish to be the first out the airlock, you are going to be different from the mass majority of people in this world around you. So much of what we speak about is seeing through the illusion of separation. And here we are asking you to create separation, because as a consciousness you wish to go forward, and for some to go forward there is initially a separation. Everyone is coming. This party is for everyone. But initially, you are the ones going forward. You are the ones that have realized that you are spirit in physical form. You are creatorship, you are God. And that made you different. You are sovereign unto yourselves, and this is part of what you have been discovering. This is part of the tools that you have been creating to now allow you to do this, to not get caught into that drama. This is new territory and will create new realities, new interactions. You on this planet at this time are some of the most knowing beings of what it is you are, why you are here, what is happening, what this reality is. And to a degree you are about to release that and go back to school. But this is a different school, for you are the teachers. It is a new playground, a new territory. There are different levels to your beingness. Learn to traverse them. This is your multidimensionality. The spiritual you, the physical you, they are both you. It is not that the physical you is some illusion and the spiritual you is the real you. They are all real. This is just the beginning, the unfolding of the freedom, of the joy, of the new way of being. Allow its difference, its unknown. Allow yourself to be separate. Allow yourself to be different. Most of all, allow yourself to be whatever you feel to be, no matter how that may go against the grain of the mass consciousness. Because what you are creating is unique. But That is why it is so wonderful. That is why it is new. It has never been before. Open yourselves to the new you, the birth of your dream, the dream that starts here.
If there was a sentence or two that could summarize this, perhaps it might go something like this. In these changing times, it is important to acknowledge, own, and celebrate that which makes you uniquely different but equally beautiful. And the time is now to bring that awareness into conscious creation, but in a way that honors life in all its manifestations, instead of hurting life or using our differences for personal gain. The full 13-minute video link will appear in the show summary and other links to the work of Story Waters. In this week's Final Words, a bit of a political scandal has erupted in the UK, and this may likely have a few of you declaring, "Tell me something I didn't already know," or asking, "Okay, so what else is new?" or "What is it this time?" It's not exactly a huge scandal, certainly not when compared to the pedophile scandal currently shaking the foundations of British society. The scandal does, however, raise an issue that transcends national borders, because the issue itself has contributed to the perpetuation of the lies that have been historically attributed to national borders and the separation of the people of the world for control and enslavement. A political party leader refused to sing the national anthem. An article by Dan Bloom appeared on the London Mirror website on September 15th, stating the following. Monarchists and political opponents have accused Jeremy Corbyn of being unpatriotic after he stood through the national anthem in silence at a Battle of Britain service. The Labour leader remained tight-lipped as dignitaries and veterans around him sang "God Save the Queen" at St. Paul's Cathedral. The article continues, Mr. Corbyn, who had earlier praised the heroism of the RAF, the Royal Air Force, during the Second World War battle for air supremacy, defended his silence. A spokesman said, Jeremy attended to show respect for those who fought in the conflicts for Britain. He stood in respectful silence during the anthem. Corbyn is fairly recently elected leader of the Labour Party in the UK, and many were quick to criticize him for his actions. The article quotes Tory MP Andrew Rossindell as saying that it's his duty, and the duty of any leader that seeks to be Prime Minister, to accept we are the nation that we are. A veteran from the Falklands War, Simon Weston, said that Mr. Corbyn had disrespected the Queen, but added he paid his respects to veterans. It wasn't them he was being disrespectful to. A bit further down in the article, the heart of the issue begins to surface. The article writes that Graham Smith of anti-monarchy group Republic said, patriotism and support for monarchy aren't the same. It's wrong to accuse people of being unpatriotic for not singing God Save the Queen. As the world becomes increasingly more aware of this global cabal and all the financial, legal, religious, media, sporting, entertainment, and political tricks that have been used to keep people dumbed down and addicted to their own enslavement, so too come the questions that relate to a so-called national identity. Ironic it may well be that the ceremony honors those who died, and they did so defending the right of the global elitists, of which the monarchy is a part, to continue enslaving humanity and destroying our planet. This situation is comparable to what I said last week about helping humans in crisis. It is right, and it is okay to help, but it honors no one to give this help without also calling out the people and the institutions that created the mess in the first place. In this case, it is right, and it is okay to honor those who served and died, but it neither honors nor helps anyone unless the people and institutions are also revealed as being the reasons for why people died, protecting interests that did not serve the whole of humanity nor our planet. Around the world, people have been given a history that has very likely been reconstructed to suit the nationalist identity of each country. citizens were conditioned to honor a flag and an anthem that was to instill a pride of being that particular identity. Sporting events around the world play national anthems to inspire both friendly and sometimes unfriendly competition. When a nation wins a gold medal at the Olympics or some other sporting event, it becomes an almost subliminal way of rubbing that patriotism in the faces of those who were not victorious. I'm not claiming to be an expert on national anthems of all the countries of the world. There are quite a few I am familiar with, however. If we look primarily at the last 150 years or so, before the US dollar became the global reserve currency, and the banking cabal imposed its slavery upon the world, the UK pound was the global reserve. Both the UK and US in more recent history are often perceived, arguably, as the more influential or powerful nations in the world, and both have anthems that are different from many other countries. The UK anthem calls people to praise, honor, and glorify the monarchy, an institution that is beginning to fall apart at the seams as more information comes into light about its connections to the global cabal, to pedophilia, and to the control of humanity in general. The lyrics also make references to defeating enemies. A second verse to this anthem calls upon God to scatter our enemies and make them fall, confound their knavish tricks, confuse their politics. On you our hopes we fix, God save the Queen. It almost sounds exactly like a cabal anthem for the control of people in the name of God under a monarchy. The U.S. anthem focuses on battles, war, power, and all four verses of the anthem contain words that many might associate to energies of negativity, fear, and from that fear ultimately comes control. Yet if we look at countries more to the north, and perhaps even to the south, there are some differences. The northern countries, Canada, Russia, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Iceland, and Greenland, which is a part of Denmark, have anthems that mostly inspire loyalty and courage through the unique geographical beauty, and also the harsher climate challenges faced by northern countries. Existence comes in supporting each other in harsh climates. Only Norway and Iceland loosely make references to warriors, and the Icelandic anthem even mentions sons of the heavens, perhaps suggesting that there is even more beyond earth. The anthem of Chile in South America describes the country as a copy of Eden, given by God with waters that washes the shores. The vow of Chileans is that either the tomb of the free will you be, or the refuge against oppression. People from New Zealand bow in song and ask humbly to God to guard Pacific's triple star from the shafts of strife and war. Perhaps in Argentina it is slightly different, as the lyrics do make cries of freedom, while also singing to "Let us live crowned in glory," or "Let us swear in glory to die." The Russian anthem speaks of wide spaces for dreaming and living, as well as brotherly love over the ages and ancient wisdom passed down by their predecessors. From southern seas to polar lands, you are unique and one of a kind, a native land protected by God. Links to various anthems mentioned will appear in the show summary for the final words. Of course, there are many more anthems between the northern and southern poles of our planet, uniquely different, yet equally beautiful in their own ways. It will be up to the people to decide if those words and music resonate any longer with the humans they are choosing now to be. A new anthem is being sung, however, and it is an anthem that is not necessarily sung, but it is an anthem that is lived through the being of awakened hearts and minds worldwide, who now understand that loyalty is not limited to a monarchy or a militaristic power, but to something much larger and more enduring than we as humans will ever be. It is my choice to feel that not singing a national anthem does not make one unpatriotic or a traitor. Indeed, we all must find our own ways to set an example for others. Some may not be called to defend or fight, and who may serve by helping, and one may choose to not sing an anthem. It is a judgment by others of those who do not sing that may make one ask, why does one not have a right to not sing, especially if one feels that one is being asked to be loyal to an entity that one now feels is no longer honoring humanity or our planet. As it has been said, courage is staying in step while others are marching to the wrong tune. We are writing a new book, talking a new language, singing a new song, dancing a new dance, and we are being a new human. A birthing spiritual human and a birthing galactic human. And we are called to anchor a new energy within a spirit of the oneness that we all share, in honor to our planet and life on and beyond our planet. Create a fantastic week until our next moment of now. So that is a sample of the unfolding higher consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is broadcast weekly from the CosmicVisionNews.com website. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary, which is also available on the website. CVN can be followed through the CVN Facebook page, Scene page, and YouTube channel, as well as on Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that we are writing a new book, talking a new language, singing a new song, dancing a new dance, and we are being a new human. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your hearts, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosures unfolding all around you. Namaste.